The latest Pompey news, updates every day from the Pompey Sound news desk.
Despite a nightmare, injury-plagued start to his time with the Blues, Mousinho is adamant that Jacob Farrell still has a future at Pompey. The left-back's loan move back home to Australia was sealed on Friday evening, and he was thrown straight into the action for his new club, Western Sydney Wanderers. Wasting no time, the 23-year-old came off the bench on Saturday to help his new side fight for a 1-1 draw against Melbourne City. It's been a frustrating spell for Farrell, who has been battling knee and groin problems ever since he signed a 4-year deal from Central Coast Mariners. Those injuries have meant he's only made 3 appearances for Pompey, though he did get a few minutes on the pitch in the championship clash at Watford last month. Mousinho made it clear, this move isn't the end of the road for the defender. The Pompey boss reckons Farrell just needs to get a consistent run of games under his belt, something he hasn't been able to do to give him a real shot at getting his career at Fratton Park properly started. Speaking to journalists, he said,
"Now Jacob's back fit again, the next step for him is to play some games. We want him to then come back and compete in the championship. We feel we're okay in terms of options at left back and are covered there now. We've got Connor Ogilvie, Jordan Williams and Zach Swanson who can play there, so the best thing for Jacob for the next 3 months is to play and get games. He's still an asset for us, that's why we needed to loan him out. He needs to play games, and that's something he's not been able to do, in a difficult start to his Portsmouth career impacted by injuries. Jacob's been in a couple of the senior squads, and this is a good opportunity for him to go and get games. He is being watched by the Australia setup and their head coach, who will be seeing how he gets on. We want him to play those games, come back fit in pre-season and go again."
Looking ahead to the World Cup, it will be nice to have the monotony, and there are long periods of monotony during a World Cup when England, if that's the country you're following, don't have a game, and that can be spiced up quite nicely if A, Australia get there, and B, they've got one or preferably more than one Pompey players in their squad, and maybe even showing on the pitch. So there's that to consider. But the main thing is the asset that Farrell represents to Pompey, because he's possibly a supreme example of Tornante's business model for Pompey, which is that besides getting into the championship, staying in the championship, establishing ourselves as a force in the championship, and then perhaps going for broke, i.e., and I shouldn't probably have used that phrase, should I? Going for the Premier League. A large part of their model is that they invest in young players who we can bring on and will either benefit the club on the pitch or benefit the club financially. So one way or another, we'll be keeping tabs on Farrell, and fingers crossed that he comes back for next season refreshed, match fresh, match fit, and suntan from some American sunshine.
Stephen Pressley has made it clear Dundee would not settle for anything under their valuation for Pompey target Luke Graham, and the head coach is adamant it was vital to keep the 21-year-old beyond the January window in a bid to save their season. He's telling the Dundee Courier,
"We're delighted Luke is still here, because the club received some really strong offers, but the club were very strong on his valuation and there was no way that we were going to settle for anything under that valuation. When we look at the market just now, I think they're quite right, because I think we've got a really top young player on our hands, and we have to be getting the correct valuation for him. It was a really important. January is a window that can make you, but it can also break you. I remember at Coventry we'd been minus 10 points at the start of the season, but we'd built momentum and were in contention for the playoffs in January. Within one game, Rotherham away, I lost Callum Wilson to a shoulder injury, and Leon Clark, my other striker, that was his last game because we sold him to Wolverhampton. And then we could hardly win another game after that. Players are important, and my experience told me it was vital that we kept him. I think he's a top young player, and it is credit to him how immensely well he has handled all the speculation. In fact, you could argue he's excelled during this uncertainty, which is amazing for him.
We'd all like to be a fly on the wall when Pompey are negotiating with other managers for players to bring in or we may be selling. And one can only picture the scene between whoever it was negotiating on Pompey's behalf for Luke Graham and the Scottish manager of Dundee, Stephen Pressley, who is a highly respected man in Scottish football. He was a dour, solid, no-nonsense centre-back in his playing career in Scotland. And he was so impressive in terms of his leadership qualities that when he stopped playing, they made him the assistant head coach of the Scottish national team. That's how eminent he is. But he is known to be a dour, I'm not going to say humorless, he is known to be a dour, hard-working, diligent manager whose job is keeping Dundee in the Scottish Premiership, because they are lurking down 2 places off the very bottom. And the way the Scottish Premier League works at the end of the season is that they have a relegation round featuring the 7 clubs that finished lowest in the league, which is obviously going to use up an awful lot of adrenaline, and you're going to have all your best players. So I think the debate between Portsmouth and Stephen Pressley was pretty tense and pretty terse. And I always think, when I think of people who might be described as typical Scots, of the P.G. Wodehouse quote, "It is never difficult to distinguish between a Scotsman with a grievance and a ray of sunshine." Anywho, if they manage to stay in the Premier League in Scotland at the end of this season, see, we'll be watching for Dundee's results now. They have a chance of finishing in the top 6, which would mean that they would be in the championship round of sort of playoffs. So we'll be following their progress, because if they survive, it's all the more likely that they'll sell him. And if they fail to survive, if they go down, surely it's almost certain that they will sell him. So we're onto a win-win situation. And it is very likely that we will start next season with 7 centre-backs minimum. That's what John Messino is now talking about. And one of them being Luke Graham.
Pompey chief Andy Cullen has come forward about why he doesn't do social media, saying,
With social media, once you go on it, then you have to engage and go backwards and forwards. And that's where it can become a bit tricky. You can't pick and choose your fights. You're either in or you're out. I made the decision that I'm out. I'd rather communicate face-to-face with people on a match day. I would rather do the fans' forums when needed, be available, be visible, speak to the local press. I really don't see what I'd gain from having to engage with people who I don't know I'm talking to. On match days, I walk around the ground. People might feel more comfortable coming forward to speak to me in that situation as well. I haven't got a group of minders or anybody around me. I try to do all the stands, the victory lounge, the fan zone, the ticket office and the shop. I also make sure my stewards are looked after, because you have a lot of staff working on a match day as well. Probably most of the questions I tend to get asked are not necessarily football-based, they tend to be operational-based, stadium-based or ticketing-based. And if I haven't got the answers, I'll always make sure I will get back to them.
Interestingly, in all the years that Andy Cullen has been with us at Pompey, we hadn't noticed that he doesn't do social media at all. I suppose we just assumed that we didn't bump into him there. Not that we do social media at Pompey Sound, actually. I don't, and I don't read it. And Mick Robertson, for example, reads it but doesn't do it. I think Steve Bone is pretty eloquent in it, but then he's a professional written journalist. And the reason that we use professionals at Pompey Sound is because we are communicating and they are professional communicators and also expert on football, in particular Portsmouth. Now, I'm not denigrating the views and contributions that I'm going to use the word ordinary fans. I do not say that disparagingly, but necessarily they're not professionals. And so they often make comments that you see repeated over and over again. So there's no great entertainment value to be had, as far as we're concerned, in social media. And we don't do it because, just like Andy Cullen interestingly alluded, you can't pick and choose your fights. You sure can't, can you? And an awful lot of people on social media, too many, are looking for a fight. But they're looking for a cowardly fight. Because not only do they kind of like almost wear a mask, they wear a mask. They're anonymous. They use funny little nicknames to disguise who they really are, which makes them feel, it seems to me, a little braver than they might have been if we knew that they really were Joe Bloggs of 27 Acacia Avenue, Gosport. So interesting. Bumped into Andy Cullen just the once, had a couple of correspondence with him, connected with Pompey Sound by email. He's extremely professional. He responds to emails instantly. And when Mick Robertson and I found ourselves standing next to him after a Pompey game in a bar, he was most engaging and really above board and honest about everything. We should be proud of him, just as we're proud, I think, most fans are, of our owners, and proud of our management team, and proud of our players and club and the ground and the training ground. I could go on, I won't. Andy Cullen is up there with the rest of them.
Former Southampton man Joe Rothwell will miss Sheffield United's trip to Pompey this weekend. The midfielder was one of two deadline day signings made by the Steel City and penned an 18-month deal following his Rangers exit. However, Rothwell's debut was far from a success, having been sent off just 35 minutes after coming off the bench in Monday's 2-1 defeat to Middlesbrough. The 30-year-old was given his marching orders by referee Gavin Ward in the 80th minute, after a late tackle on Hayden Hackney, with Sheffield United chasing an equaliser. United boss Chris Wilder said,
"I think it's just a mistimed tackle. I've got no arguments with the decision. If you can give me 5 seconds, yet again, to talk about the consistency level of the referees. It's just absolutely so poor. It's ridiculous for both teams. The consistency of the decisions. That didn't play a part in the result, it was just the general flow of the game. Ward was just the star of the show and wanted to break it up all the time. We don't want to come and see him, we want to go and see two teams having a right go at it." And, for the majority of the time, that was the case. But for Joe it was maybe a bit of frustration. Maybe not playing football for the early part of the season and wanting to make his mark. It's a mistimed tackle. I've got no issue with the decision off the back of that. He's got his head in his hands, straight away and in the changing room afterwards. And obviously that made it double difficult for us to build on that momentum that we obviously had after getting back into the game.
So Sheffield United, without one of their key acquisitions during the window when they arrive at Fratton Park, and so that's good for us. Not good for them. Simple as that. And Chris Wilder is now a manager, and we don't mind him at all. He's a good, solid Championship manager, but his job's on the line. Sheffield United will not be as understanding as certain owners, and if Sheffield United either look as though they're going to be relegated along with their sister club Sheffield Wednesday, or are relegated, then it's almost certain that there'll be a vacancy there, because that's how the Championship works, generally speaking, rightly or wrongly. So a lot of what he says is with all of that in mind. When he says that it was a straight red card and he accepts it, if you've looked at it, it really, really was. It was a very dangerous, aggressive tackle. The commentators, I think they may have been Sheffield people, said it's an orange as soon as it happened. And there were gasps in the commentary box. Oh, it was like that. You know, it was a potential leg breaker. It's as simple as that. And whether or not he immediately regretted it because he gets sent off, or he immediately regretted it because he might have injured somebody, ended their career, it's hard to say. He certainly likes to play as if he is a force to be reckoned with. Sartorially, he's modelled himself on the hard men of football. What was his name? Was it Terry Hurlock? Something like that, who looked as though he'd just come down from the mountains and played like it. But you wouldn't argue with him. And Joe Rothwell seems to have taken on a similar demeanour on the pitch. But we won't be worried about him on Saturday because he'll be at home, right? Watching the racing. No doubt. I'm going to have a moan about the fact that Wilder went on about consistency. These are people who've never refereed. I think if you're a manager and you want to go on and on about referees, do a bit of refereeing yourself. Referees don't go on about the inconsistency of managers, but managers seem to think, and they're consistent in this, that there is inconsistency. Well, I just want to take you to a simple mathematical certainty, as evinced by Stephen Hawking. No single moment, and by moment I mean nanosecond, no nanosecond in any football match is exactly the same as any nanosecond in any previous football match that's ever taken place. It's unique. And a rotten tackle, a stinking rotten tackle, is unique in so many ways. The circumstances, the moment, the ball, where it is, who it is, what's just happened, all of those things make a contribution, a huge contribution to the sheer uniqueness of virtually every decision a referee has to make. Obviously, if somebody hoofs the ball into touch, then it's a throw into the other team. That's easy to get consistent. But so many moments in football are so 50-50. And when I trained as a referee, the guy who was training us, he said, when two guys go up for a header, they're both fouling each other. What do? It's a fact of the matter. You give it one way, you generally favour the defender, particularly if the ball is anywhere near the goal. But the point is this, very simply this. It's about time managers of the calibre of Chris Wilder found a more intelligent and sophisticated way of expressing the fact that their hands have been tied for an upcoming game because one of their players did something stupid and potentially dangerous, but he wants to talk about the referee. Who got it right?